Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use the flexible doll head and hands mold, and we're going to make a little face just like this. So what I'm using is Super Sculpey right out of the box. This is what it looks like. It comes like in one box with 4 slabs. This is the flesh tone, or you can use the beige, whichever one you have on hand. Okay, and you can use a pasta machine, which is what I have done. I've rolled this through the pasta machine a few times to make it soft and malleable and thin. If you don't have a pasta machine, because once you use a pasta machine with Super Sculpey, then you can't use it with food anymore. So if you want, you can just using your hands, just twist and fold and roll up the polymer clay, and the warmth of your hands will make it malleable, and you can use it that way. Okay, so I have this set up so that I don't bore you with doing all of the cavities, because once you know how to do one, you can do all of them are pretty much the same. So starting with the face, what I do first is determine how much clay I'll need, and so you just fill it randomly with little bits of clay. Fill it up, including the ears. Okay, that looks pretty good. So then you're going to remove it, and then what I like to do is roll it up into a ball, and you're erasing any creases or lines, and then as soon as it's smooth, you're going to roll it into a cone, a pointy cone, just like this. And then you're going to take the tip of the cone and press it right into the nose cavity and press it straight down. And then once it's in the mold, you're not going to want it to pop up and down, because then it's going to make lines in it. So while you're holding it steady, you're going to fill the ears and the neck area. Once you do this once or twice, you'll become an expert at it. Okay? And the back of the head, you just roll up a ball and smooth it in, because there's not too much detail in the back. And then in order to do the hands, what you're going to do is take a coil of clay, a thin coil of clay. Okay. And I like it to be as thin as the wrist area. And then I like to flatten out almost like a pad here at the top. Almost like it looks like a little tiny shovel. All right, and you're going to hold it and press it into the finger cavity. Okay. Now if you can fill the thumb at the same time by just spreading the clay, that's great, because then you don't have any lines to erase. But if you can't, I'll show you how to just use a tiny coil and fill in the thumb area afterwards. And then you're just going to pull and press the clay into the cavity for the hand. And the same thing for this guy. And this one we'll do the thumb separately. Okay, and if you have too much, you can just take your X-Acto knife and cut it off here. All right, and then in order to do the thumb separately, you're just going to roll up a tiny coil of clay here, like this, and you're just going to fill it in, and then take your sculpting tool and just press it in there. Okay, so now let's talk about removing them from the mold. Okay, I'm going to put it on a toothpick. So let's take the back of the head out first. And this is a tip for beginners. You put the back of the head on the front, making sure not to pull the clay out and then press it down again, because you don't want to put any extra indentations onto the face area. And then a good idea is to just put 2 tiny little coils of clay behind the ears. Okay. Okay, and we can just attach them, you know, slightly in the mold. Now, if you have any trouble with the clay sticking to itself, you can put a little bit of liquid Sculpey on it, but my suggestion is don't put the liquid Sculpey down in the neck area, because that's where you're going to be putting the toothpick. And if you put liquid polymer clay on the toothpick, it'll bake and you won't be able to get the toothpick out. So only do it at the top if you can. Okay. All right, so now we're just going to gently flex the mold and it's going to come right out. Okay. And then the first thing we're going to do is smooth it along the neckline here. And then the first order of business is to, where am I here? Put the toothpick into the neck area, okay, which is pretty easy. All right, and then holding it now with the toothpick, you're going to go around the head and you're going to just blend back to front. Now, don't get crazy at the top here, because this is going to most likely be covered with hair. So you don't want to crush the facial features in order to, I got a little line on the nose here, so you just gently press it out. And because you're using polymer clay, you can always tweak the features of the face. If you want to make the nose a little bit more pointy, less girl-like, you can just tweak it a little bit. Then I like to emphasize the eyes a little bit, so I just depress it in just a tiny bit with my dental tool, so they look more embedded. Okay. And then let's do the mouth area. I use my X-Acto knife to, you know, separate the top lip from the back, from the bottom lip. And then you can just tilt the lip up a tiny bit. If you've gotten any lines in it, you can just smooth them out. And then I'm going to make the jawline just a tiny bit more square. All right. This goes to show you can tweak the faces however you want. All right, so now holding the piece so that you don't squish the facial features, just make sure that the ears are attached on the sides. That's where that little coil of clay comes in handy, okay? And then you can, you know, tip the ears out if you want. And if you lose any of the lines, you just put them back in with your tool. Okay, and I like to put a hole in the side here so it looks more realistic. And the same thing over here. All right. Now, I'm not going to take the time to, you know, smooth down all of the features, but of course you will. And then you want to make sure also that you poke into nostrils, because the holes do give it a more realistic look, okay? And then at that point, you're ready to put it in your baking tray and bake it according to the manufacturer's instructions. you might want to also wait until we do the hands and bake them all together. Okay, so now moving on to the hands. We're pretty much going to be doing the same thing. You're going to remove one hand and then the other one. Okay, and one is the inner hand and one is the upper hand. Okay, and you're just going to press them together. I start at the wrist area. That's the safest area with the least amount of detail. Make sure you get them together, and once they're able to hold themselves together, I insert my toothpick. Okay, and then once it's on the toothpick, it's a little bit more secure and you can work with it a little bit easier. Okay, and so let's do the simple hand first. So all you have to do is erase the connection lines, okay? Pose the thumb however you want it. Okay. You can put a little indentation at the end of the fingers and a little indentation at the end of the palm here, and flatten out the wrist. Okay, and now if you have any extra flashing, you just take your X-Acto knife and trim it off. Okay, now in its simplest form, if you're working with children or you just need a quick hand for a simple bizarre craft, okay, once you get the lines out, you can certainly bake the hand in this position and it will read as a small doll hand, okay? And before you bake it, you want to make sure that you twirl your toothpick so that you can easily remove it after it's baked, because you'll be slipping the hand onto a piece of wire for whatever your craft is. Okay, so that's one hand, okay? So now I'll use the same hand so I don't take the same amount of time. Okay, so if you want to do a little bit more sophisticated hand, if you're doing one-of-a-kind doll making, okay, or you just want a little bit more detail, the easiest way to do it is to use the side of the dental tool and deepen your indentation marks between the fingers, and then you want to do the same thing on the inner side. And then once you have those lines, you can then come in with your X-Acto knife and just cut the fingers apart so that they're individual fingers. Okay? Now, then you're going to separate them, and starting with the two center fingers, you're going to be touching and rolling the fingers so that they elongate ever so slightly. When these are stretched out, they'll make sort of a nice hand for a 7 or 8 inch doll. Okay. And then with the index finger, point that index finger up a little bit. Now let's say you made the pinky, let's see, my pinky is like a tiny bit too stretched out. So let's just take a tiny little bit off of it. Okay, and then what you can do is you just put another tip on it. And all of the fingers tip up a little bit on the ends, and that makes them extra dainty. All right, and then the same thing with the thumb. You're going to want the thumb to be a little bit more posed. So what I like to do is press it inwards and then put a little, a little bend on the tip of the thumb. Okay, and this will bend down. And you could put a little bit of an indentation in the center of the palm here. I think my thumb went a little bit too crazy here. Okay, so this one is posed a little bit. So when you're happy with it, I could spend like a good 10 or 15 minutes on this hand getting it perfect, but for the video you get the message. Okay, you just pose your fingers, give them a little bit of expression, and then right before you put them in your tray, you make sure that you twirl your toothpick so that it comes off easily. And let's see, I have these hands that I did earlier, okay? There's one, and here's the other one. And as you can see, this one's already baked, and this one I did twirl so it comes off without a problem. Okay, so once you do both of your hands, you put them in the baking tray, and then you bake them according to the manufacturer's instructions. And when you add a little bit of mohair yarn and a little ribbon, you can paint the faces with acrylic paints and tiny liner brushes. I go into all kinds of detail. I have two polymer clay doll making videos, one to make baby fairies and one to make lady fairies, and I go into all kinds of detail about painting and making the little wiglets if you're interested in that, but you could pretty much just figure out how it's done just by looking at it. So anyway, that's how you use the new head and hands push mold. It's the same technique to do these hands. It's the top and the bottom of each hand, and I'm going to be doing another video on how to make a full doll head using just the cabo face molds, the large cabo faces and the tiny cabo faces.